Tires screech as a drunk couple realizes a young girl is heading down the middle of the road with blood covering her from the neck down. In her left hand, she's gripping a knife, while in her right hand, a puddle of blood is running down the floor of which she's currently walking. Panic fills the vehicle filled with the young couple who's witnessing such a mortifying sight. The young girl is gazing directly at them as she freezes in her current position. She's calm, but how can this young innocent apparent child be so calm when she looks like she just butchered an elephant? She's not blinking at all, as her focus is just locked in on the young teenage couple who's still panicking as they observe the young girl. "What do you think I should do?" asks Philip as he turns over his attention to his girlfriend Stacy. Stacy, with a pale blank expression on her face, just sat there like a statue with her attention still locked on the young girl. "Stacy, do you hear me?" Philip cried out aloud, yanking Stacy's attention from the young girl and placing it back onto himself. "What, Philip?" Stacy yelled. Philip grinned. "What should I do?" he asked nervously. Stacy glimpsed at him before staring back over at the blood-covered young girl. "Put the car in drive and get us the hell out of here," she replied frantically. "What are you waiting for?" She can see her boyfriend's nervousness on full display. Sweat is running down his forehead as well as his palms. He's shaking like a child witnessing their biggest fear standing right in front of them. "Philip, go. Do you hear me? Get us the hell out of here," she insisted. Her words flew in his ears and went out without him flinching, as if he didn't hear her speak. "Philip, get us out of here now," she added. She shoved him violently, over and over again, finally knocking a little sense in him as the young girl gradually began approaching their vehicle with the knife still wrapped firmly in her hand. Stacy's eyes began to water as though she could sense what was getting ready to take place. "Philip, what are you waiting for?" she exclaimed. Her words aren't appearing to get through to her boyfriend, which caused her to strike him on the right cheek with her open right palm. All of his senses seemed to return right back to him, causing him to place the vehicle into drive as he noticed the young girl getting closer and closer to his car. He threw his foot on the gas pedal, immediately launching the car in the direction of the young girl. Stacy watched in horror briefly before slamming her eyes closed as she was bracing for the vehicle to collide into the young girl. "I can't do it," yelled Philip, whose heart beated through his chest as he slammed on his car brakes, causing his vehicle to stop just inches before the young girl, who didn't seem shaken or bothered at all about almost being ran over by a vehicle. Stacy's eyes opened widely as she locked her attention onto the young girl, who glimpsed at her momentarily before looking over at Philip. Tears began streaming down her eyes as she closed them for a second. "Where's my mommy?" says the young girl. "Where's my daddy?" she continued as she took a look at her hand holding the knife. Philip grabbed onto the door handle, causing Stacy to grab his wrist. "Philip, what are you doing?" she asked in panic. "We can't trust this little girl." Philip's eyes widened. He can see the fear in his girlfriend's eyes. She's in a full state of shock and panic. She's in fear for their safety, but deep down inside, Philip isn't. "Do you hear yourself? It's a little girl," he responded. "She probably found her parents dead, or someone may have tried to hurt her, so she defended herself." Stacy's jaw dropped. She's stunned. She's in awe by her boyfriend's words. She just doesn't get it. "Philip, do you hear yourself?" she says. "This girl isn't innocent. She's evil. She's one of those evil kids we read about in the papers." Philip giggled. "First of all, no one reads the newspapers anymore," he replied sarcastically. Secondly, this girl needs our help. The tears running down the young girl's eyes is melting his heart. He's at a loss for words as he removes his girlfriend's hand from his wrist to allow him to open up the car door as the young girl approaches the side of the vehicle, still with the knife in hand. "Are you okay?" he asks as his girlfriend attempted to slam his car door shut, but was unsuccessful in doing so. "Stacy, stop," he shouted. "Relax, okay? Someone must have hurt this little girl," he insisted. "Where's my mommy? And where's my daddy?" asked the young girl. Her face displays confusion. "Clearly, she must be lost," says Philip, attempting to ease his girlfriend's mind. Stacy had a few shots of liquor earlier, however her mind isn't clouded. She can think clearly. She knows that something is wrong, and the root of the wrong lies within the young girl standing next to her boyfriend's vehicle. "Philip, let's get out of here. Let's go," she said in an almost defeated tone, her eyes dripping tears. Her heart is pounding. She just can't comprehend why they're in this predicament in the first place. Philip took a look into her eyes. His charm is what captured her heart since the very second they met. He stole her heart and he's held it hostage ever since. His smirk brought a calmness over her, which made her suddenly believe that everything was going to be just fine. He leaned in to give her a kiss on the lips. "We're going to help this little girl out. Then I'm going to do what I do and help you out," he says playfully. Stacy smiled from ear to ear as their lips met just over the gear stick of his vehicle. Stacy closed her eyes as their tongues collided non-stop, just before she could feel all of Philip's weight fall over onto her. Her eyes opened wide enough to almost cause her eyes to roll out of her head. "I love you," says Philip, who struggled to utter those words. All of Philip's weight leaned onto Stacy, causing her to struggle to stay upright as she was filled with fright while she took a look into the eyes of the young girl, who began smiling joyously as Philip's blood stained every inch of Stacy. "My parents, where are they?" asked the young girl as she pulled the knife from out of Philip's back. Stacy shrugged her shoulders as she nervously responded, "I don't know." The young girl grabbed Philip by the neck before pulling him out of the vehicle. "They're gone," she says. "They're in hell where they belong, just like your boyfriend, and soon, just like you will be." Stacy screamed in a state of shock. She can't move an inch. Her body is numbed with fear. The young girl with the razor-sharp knife leaned in. "You know what?" she asked rhetorically. "I killed my parents, and I killed my older brother too, and our neighbors. And you know what? I'm just getting started." Before Stacy could free the fear from out of her system, the young girl jammed the knife in hand into the throat of Stacy, whose eyes stayed wide open while pounds of blood spilled from her neck. The young girl examined Stacy, whose eyes remained open until her soul escaped from her body moments later. On this night, Friday the 13th, was the night the young, innocent, sweet girl became deadly Gabriela. Nothing but red and blue lights fill the dark, empty road, otherwise known as Route 666. The small town of Ophelia, Virginia, will never be the same after this night. Young Gabriela is resting on the back passenger seat, curled up in a ball as she constantly cries out, "They stole me from my parents." Gabriela can't be consoled after officer attempts to comfort her with their words. She just won't allow anyone to place a finger on her, as nervousness and panicness sets in non-stop. "Get away from me," she continuously cried out. "I want my mommy and daddy. Where's my mommy and daddy?" Kicking and screaming was all Gabriela did from the moment the police arrived just minutes after she gutted Stacy in the neck. To be just 12 years of age, Gabriela is clever and quick on her toes. She's always thinking. She knows for certain being tense as the head of everyone else is a necessity, and it's a quality she picked up from her mother. Her conniving, heartless ways are the qualities that's transformed Gabriela into whom she is today. Her parents never loved her. She was an accident child. She wasn't supposed to be born. A failed abortion along with a failed Plan B attempt are the two main reasons Gabriela is alive today. Flashbacks of the moments her mother made known to her that she swallowed pills in order to prevent her from even being born haunts her thoughts as she relives the moments of her executing her parents. Gabriela has spent her entire life hearing her parents tell her they wish that she died at birth or was never born. She's an expense that they wish never existed. How does Gabriela know this? Because she's been told this her whole life. Rewind to 8 a.m. this morning. At the dining room table, sitting alone, was Gabriela. A bowl flooded with cereal and a very little milk sat before Gabriela atop of a wooden table. All alone in a rundown house is the norm for young Gabriela, and has been basically from the very moment she's been born. Cops have been called to her home more than a dozen times due to her parents leaving her home alone. Child Services has been involved several of those times. However, never once was she taken away from her parents. And that may have plenty to do with the fact that her father is a former Marine. He's a decorated Marine who served his country for more than 3 decades. In the town of Ophelia, military veterans are worshipped, and that's the main reason why Gabriela's father, Gabriel, hasn't ever been arrested, despite his strong armed robbery criminal ways. He has PTSD. He's had flashbacks of his time during battle, of which he's ended a few lives to protect both himself along with his fellow Marines. His past haunts his thoughts non-stop. It's been the reason why he's verbally exploded constantly and rapidly on both his wife, Sandra, along with Gabriela. Tattoos are spilled all over his arms and legs, along with knife scars on both of his wrists after several failed suicide attempts. Once he slit his wrist in front of Gabriela, all because he was mentally exhausted over her presence, which he informed her just before he dug the sharp blade into his wrist. Gabriela watched in horror, but ensured pleasure, as her father tumbled down to the ground moments after ounces of blood flew from out of his wrist. After he sliced it wide open, it all happened during dinner time. Gabriela observed the blood covering her father inch by inch as the blood escaped from his wrist at a rapid rate. Gabriela didn't flinch a bit. She didn't panic at all. Neither did she cry out to her mother for help. She just continued munching on her lasagna, enjoying it as she watched in excitement as her father's soul slowly attempted to escape from his body. Gabriela watched on, hoping to witness death for the first time, something she's heard about on a nightly basis because her parents were always watching the evening news. This was going to be the first time she witnessed death. However, her plans were spoiled Just seconds before half of her father's blood painted the kitchen floor, Gabriela's mother Sandra entered the kitchen from the bedroom with her cell phone glued to her ear as usual as she gossiped away with one of her many friends. Home is where she spent most of her days when she wasn't at work, and not because she wanted to. It's all because, as she always put it, Gabriela's fault. The child she's never wanted but had is the reason she spends most of her days stuck in her home. It's made her miserable over the years, and she blames both her husband, especially Gabriela, for ruining her once party lifestyle. Her and her husband barely lay in the same bed together. Although she loves him dearly, she despises him greatly. However, entering into the kitchen on that night and immediately observing her husband laid out on the floor passed out caused her heart to pause. In a split second, she looked over and spotted her daughter smiling sinisterly from ear to ear. Gabriela clearly wanted her father dead, and that set off Sandra, who rushed over to the kitchen counter to grab a roll of paper towels along with several dishcloths. She threw herself in the direction of her husband, who rested in the center of the kitchen, appearing lifeless. "Gabriela, help me," Sandra yelled aloud. "Get over here now and help me save your father." Gabriela sat there before turning to face her mother. No words poured out of her mouth. No sympathy was displayed on Gabriela's face as she's witnessing her father gradually losing his life. Gabriela listened as her mother begged her to help her out, but she didn't budge. A minute flew by, then another, as Gabriela continued hearing her mother bawl out for her aid. However, Gabriela refused to lift even a finger to assist her father. "Gabriela, help me save your father," Sandra exclaimed. Gabriela froze for seconds before shaking her head. "Let him die, mother. He deserves to die," says Gabriela with no compassion. Her mother's eyes widened in shock. "I raised a monster, an evil witch," says Sandra in a state of panic. Gabriela giggled. "That's funny, Mom, seeing as I came from an evil witch." Gabriela replied, still with an evil grin stuck on her face. Gabriela prayed for her father's death on that night. However, her evil prayers weren't answered. The medics arrived just in time, and Sandra's love and devotion for Gabriel elevated to an all-time high on that night, bringing them closer together and growing their love more than ever before. Fast forward to this blazing hot morning where Gabriela is sitting at the dining room table all alone like normal. Neither of her parents has spoken to her since that almost fatal night of her father's terrible near death. They still yell and scream at Gabriela, but as far as conversations, even to see if their daughter is doing fine, they refuse to do so. Gabriela's been fine with it ever since, which disturbs her parents, who finally decided on what needs to be done to end their biggest headache once and for all. So as Gabriela continued chowing down on her breakfast, all alone like usual, soon after in the dining room entered the two of her parents, who could hardly look her in the eyes. No words were spoken while her parents took their seats at the same dining table with no meals resting on the table before them. Gabriela continued eating, completely ignoring her parents' presence. "I wish you were never born," shouted Sandra, as both the parents turned their attentions towards their sinister child. Gabriela continued aiming her attention straight ahead at the colorful wallpaper her grandmother had thrown up decades ago. "I hate you both," says Gabriela, causing her parents to snicker. "As much as you hate me being your daughter, I hate you too even being my parents," she added straightforwardly. "As far as I'm concerned, you two aren't my parents. Never was, and you two never will be." Gabriela kicked her chair back away from the dining table, allowing her to stand up from her seat. She grabbed her now empty bowl from off of the table and slowly walked over to the kitchen sink. "Young lady, come back here now," shouted Gabriel. You've been my biggest regret since your first breath on this earth. I despise you in every way. Now I want you to come back here at once, young lady. Gabriela failed to obey her father's demands as she slammed her bowl into the kitchen sink, causing it to shatter all over the place. Ah! She screamed aloud. I hate you. I hate you both. The 12 years of being mistreated has built up and pent up anger that Gabriela is unleashing all at this time. Her anger is evident, however, it's not throwing off her focus at all as she spotted a 12-inch razor-sharp knife resting on the countertop just a couple of feet away from her. Her eyes glistened as she was injected with glee. Loud screeching sounded off as her father stood up from the seat to turn towards his daughter, who kept her back facing him as her father continued launching his anger towards his daughter. We're getting rid of you once and for all, he shouted. Gabriela looked over at him over her shoulder, rolling her eyes over and over again, just so her father could witness her blatant disrespect towards him. Shipping you to boarding school won't do you any good, he shouted. It's time we get rid of you once and for all. He didn't let another second travel by before he marched over in his daughter's direction. Each step he took caused a gigantic thud, one after the other. He's fueling with rage, and it's all because of Gabriela, who's breathing heavily as her heart races. With every step her father takes, she can't measure just how far he is from her at this time. She knows he's stronger, faster, and more powerful than she will ever be. Therefore, she must react to her father faster than he can to her, which caused her to immediately dash at full speed in his direction. Both of her hands are wrapped around the knife as she rushes in his direction. Her immediate action has thrown her father off completely as she shoves the knife right into his gut, causing him to belch out in a painful cry. If that weren't enough, a stone-cold expression painted Gabriela's face as she watched her father drop down to his knees. Now the drip of empathy was displayed by Gabriela, who yanked the knife from out of his gut and shoved it into his chest repeatedly as she could hear her mother beg her to stop. Gabriela didn't stop. In fact, she kept going, causing more than 30 stab wounds into her father's system before her sights were aimed directly at her mother. You're not gonna get rid of me, mother. If you could, you would have years ago, says Gabriela. I'm getting rid of you, mother. Sandra, shaking with terror, attempted to dash away from her daughter. However, her fear for her own safety caused her not to pay attention to anything going on around her. That caused her to run right into her father's grandfather clock on the opposite end of the room. She wasn't paying any attention to what rested before her because she was too busy paying attention to the evil miscreant rushing in her direction. Sandra's focus went blank momentarily before she woke up, resting on her back, looking directly up at Gabriela towering over her. Her mother, filled with fear, watched in disbelief while her own daughter dangled the knife over her. Sandra slid away from Gabriela an inch, only to watch her daughter move slowly along with her. I'm looking at the devil when I look at you, Gabriela, her mother says. I knew you were unholy from the moment you were conceived. Everyone told me to get rid of you, even your own brother. Our neighbors fear you. It's your own aura, your mere presence that's ingested with evil. You won't get away with this, deadly Gabriela. Gabriela grinned. Watch me, says Gabriela jokingly. Too bad you won't be able to watch me get away with murder. Gabriela hung the same knife she gutted her father with over her mother for several moments. Then within the blink of an eye, Gabriela inserted the same knife into her mother twice as many times as she did her father. Now back to the present moment. Gabriela is still kicking and screaming on the backseat of the young couple's car she's just murdered. In the cop's eyes, it's a young girl who's gone through hell and back. Meanwhile, Gabriela is using this time to think of how she's going to get from out of this situation with her freedom still intact. Tears are drizzling down young Gabriela's face as she continues kicking and screaming endlessly on the back seat of the young teenage couple's vehicle as she notices dried up blood rusting all over her hands. Blood from her father, mother, brother, neighbors, and the young couple she's just slaughtered. Blood rests on her hands at this time. She's acting innocent, all the while plotting her next move. The road's swarming with cops, every square inch for the next mile going north and south on Route 666 is flooded with police vehicles. Everyone's scratching their heads. Every single officer surrounding the murder scene is attempting to figure out what events have led up to this very moment. No one's more interested in this case more than Detective Ashley Pierce, the lead detective assigned to solve this horrific case. Tragedy on top of tragedy has occurred. She spoke with a cigarette leaving her mouth that she just sparked with her lighter just seconds before. Her partner Jake Wiley's full attention is targeted directly at her. She's breathtaking. Her long red hair and freckled face just magnifies her beauty. Prom Queen is what she was just over 5 years ago. The runner-up to Miss America was her title just 3 years before this night. Many speculate what is the primary reason why she became a cop and now a lead detective. Her beauty is evident, but even more so her knowledge and her skills as a detective is immaculate. Words are flowing from out of her mouth while Jake is fully caught up in just watching her beauty placed on full display. "Jake, do you hear me? Let's go," she shouted as she was finished speaking to him. The wind is blowing violently. The trees are attempting to fly away from their planted positions. Her focus turned away from her partner onto the marked police vehicle where the two teenagers were just murdered. Young Gabriela is bawling her eyes out endlessly as Detective Ashley Pierce cautiously approaches the vehicle. A flock of officers are swarming around the vehicle, engaging in private conversations about what they believe just took place in this vehicle. Attempting to calm down Gabriela is Officer Peters, a longtime officer of the A.K.A. Police Department. A look of bewilderment sits atop of his face as he notices two detectives with their badges dangling from their necks approaching the vehicle. Gabriela hasn't been receptive to anyone thus far, and he doesn't want to further upset this young, seemingly distraught little girl. As the detectives got within a dozen feet of the vehicle, Officer Peters rushed over in their direction to prevent them from getting any closer. "Don't take another step closer," he blurted out immediately, striking Detective Ashley Pierce's nerves. She ignored his words even as he stood before her and her partner attempting to block them from the vehicle. Detective Ashley Pierce has faced sexism, discrimination, along with sexual harassment over the years as she's been a detective by her fellow officers and even detectives. It bothered her at first, however she's learned to deal with it. Times now are much simpler than before is what she always reminds herself about. That prevents her from acting out of character. What she knows is what everyone is expecting of her. However, she won't. The position she's in and how quickly she's earned this position is much bigger than she is. In order for her to open the doors for the other women in the A.K.A. Police Department, it's up to her actions today, in the past, and in the future that will determine if the most notorious anti-woman police department in history finally changes for the better. She maneuvered around Officer Peters like a slick spy. He yet again slid before her with his focus fully tuned into her. "Officer," he says, however, before he could continue, she immediately interrupted him. "It's Detective," she replied swiftly. "It's Detective Ashley Peters. In this case, now belongs to my partner and I. Now if you would be so kindly and please inform your fellow officers to step aside. She backs down to no one. She's fell for a no one, and it shows in her actions. Her confidence never lacks. She knows the power she's earned, which is why she never minds displaying it to anyone who offends her in any way. A stare down ensued. However, Officer Peters knew he was in a lose-lose predicament, which caused him to eventually back down moments later. He conceded without even uttering that word. He just backed away from her as he suddenly signaled to his fellow officers to back away from the vehicle containing young Gabriela. Detective Pierce wanted to smile from ear to ear. However, she just held in her excitement. Nothing's better to her than putting a douchebag in his place, which is exactly what she had done. The other officers made room for her along with her partner to make their way over to the vehicle where Gabriela suddenly calmed down. Her eyes are bloodshot red. Dry tears are staining her cheeks as she takes a look at Detective Ashley Pierce's eyes. She's avoiding Detective Pierce's partner at all costs because she's been eavesdropping on all of their conversations going on around her. She knows Detective Pierce is in charge of this investigation. She knows in order for her to escape this situation without being handcuffed and hauled away to prison, that she must win over Detective Pierce at all costs. She's examining Detective Pierce from head to toe. Her objective is to figure out just what kind of individual she's about to face. In Gabriela's young years on this earth, cop crime dramas have stolen her attention over the years. The criminals who got away with murder caught her attention, but nowhere near as much as the ones who were caught and sent to prison. Those losers are who Gabriela studied the most, mainly how they moved and the actions they took, which led to their terrible predicaments they've all ended up facing. Mistake after mistake led to them all losing their cases, which is what Gabriela plans on avoiding. In her mind, she knows based on the evil glance Detective Pierce has been giving her from the moment their eyes met, that she's not on her side. Detective Pierce is continuing to examine her as though she's gazing through her soul. Getting away with multiple murders was what she planned on doing, and it's what she expected to do with dealing with those other officers. However, now things won't be as simple as she expected before Detective Pierce arrived. Detective Pierce won't remove her focus from her, not even the slightest. It's aching Gabriela's nerves to the point that her blood is boiling. She's nervous, however that emotion she's burying deep down inside of her. That emotion can never be placed on display, especially at this time. Gabriela took a deep breath before she suddenly released more tears from her eyes, almost on command. Gabriela took a look around before she blurted out, "Where's my parents?" She took a look at Detective Pierce's partner, who stood right next to her. That caused Detective Pierce to look at her partner as well. She's attempted to read young Gabriela. She'll never judge a book by its cover. She's a detective. How could she ever do such a thing? Especially given that she's learned from her past mistakes. For example, a single mother whose personality appears sweeter than honey charmed her to the point she couldn't expect her to hurt a fly. Judging that woman by her cover caused her to defend her from even being interrogated when that woman was accused of murdering her fiancé. Well, turns out that woman was a sociopath who did kill her husband. By Detective Pierce not bringing her down to the station for an interrogation, that led to more murders being committed by that woman. The murders of her own children, who haunts Detective Pierce's thoughts every single night, is the reason why she refuses to judge a book by its cover ever again. In her mind, since that case, every alleged criminal that she's come across is guilty until proven innocent. She refuses to look at things any other way. As she gazes back at Gabriela, she's seeing none but evil from inside of the young girl who began kicking and screaming yet again. "Where's my parents?" she asks, aloud, causing chills to tingle down Detective Ashley Pierce's spine. Suddenly rumbles of thunder sounded off back to back, as though the heavens could sense the evil coming from within this young girl. Detective Pierce shook her head. She's not buying what this young girl is attempting to sell to her. She has all the facts. She knows Gabriela's parents were gutted like fishers. She can clearly see that was the same fate of the two teenagers being placed in body bags by the coroner workers. One thing is for certain, and that is that young Gabriela was present for all the murders. Where are my parents? She continued to bawl out. Where's my mommy and daddy? Sadness is glued to Gabriela's face. It can't be pried off even if you attempted to with the strength of 1,000,000 men. Detective Wiley is being sympathetic to the young girl who is seemingly distraught. It's hurting his heart to witness such a soul-crushing sight. His heart is crushed witnessing the visual of this young girl. Detective Pierce isn't at all convinced. Gabriela can tell based on the detective's reactions to her tears. She has no empathy for her, which caused Gabriela to sit up as she stared directly at Detective Pierce. Where's my mommy and daddy? She asked once more while aiming her attention at Detective Pierce. They're dead, Gabriela, replied Detective Pierce bluntly, startling everyone present. Where's my mommy and daddy? She asked while aiming all of her attention at Detective Pierce. They're dead, Gabriela, replied Detective Pierce bluntly, startling everyone present. Are you serious? Detective Wiley questioned her while immediately pulling her aside. Detective Pierce rolled her eyes. She shrugged her partner's hands from off of her shoulders right away. She's swift. She's always thinking. And at this point, her mind is already made up as to how she feels about this young girl. You have got to be kidding me, says Detective Wiley straightforward. I'm not kidding you at all, she replied in a hurry. Her face paints anger. Her anger can be seen from outer space. She sees through Gabriela's behavior. It's just not convincing to her at all. I know exactly what I'm doing, she says as she steps through her partner, bumping him on the shoulder to allow her to make her way back to young Gabriela. She knows she's going about this matter all wrong. Her emotions are getting the very best of her, which she can't continue to allow, which caused her to take several deep breaths to calm her nerves. She meditated right then and there briefly. That brief moment she took to calm herself down was witnessed by young Gabriela as she kept an eye out on her entire surroundings. Detective Pierce took a few more steps in her direction. Suddenly, calmness ran from head to toe of Detective Pierce. Her emotions clouded her judgment, and she can't continue on that same path. That thought led her to taking a seat next to Gabriela, who's covered in blood. What happened to my mommy and daddy? She asked distraughtly. Detective Pierce locked eyes with her concerned partner before returning her attention back to Gabriela. That's something we would like to know, she said sarcastically. She exhaled deeply. Gabriela, your parents were murdered, and so were their neighbors, along with this young teenage couple. Before Detective Pierce could utter another word, she could hear her partner clearing his throat. That rumbling coming from her partner spoke volumes to her without any words rolling from out of his tongue. Gabriela knew what her partner was attempting to do before Detective Pierce realized what he was attempting to do. Gabriela's 10 steps ahead of everyone, which caused her to gently lean over until she was resting her head on the lap of Detective Pierce, who was instantly shocked. Her feelings about Gabriela shifted at that sudden moment, which was precisely what Gabriela's plan was to do, which is win her over. That's what she did at that moment. She could feel the detective combing through her hair with her fingers. Detective Pierce's eyes began to well like a waterfall. Hearing the sound of Gabriela crying yet again melted her heart. Shh, everything is gonna be just fine, Detective Pierce spoke. I promise you, we will get justice for your parents' deaths. She continued cuddling Gabriela as Gabriela glimpsed over at Detective Pierce's partner, whose face displayed sadness. She has them both right where she wants them, which allowed her to gently reach for Detective Pierce's gun, which sat at her left side. Gabriela gently removed it from her holster, gradually, before she rested it under her left cheek. So you're telling me I don't have a family anymore? Gabriela asked in a sad tone of voice. Where am I going to live and with who? Asked Gabriela. Detective Pierce's heart was crushed. She couldn't ever imagine being placed in a predicament as the one Gabriela has been forced into. Everything will be just fine, says Detective Pierce, who's completely let her guard down when it comes to Gabriela. Get the car started up, Jake. Let's get this girl out of here and to someplace warm, she says, causing her partner to agree. In a matter of minutes, Detective Pierce's right foot was slammed down on the gas pedal as she was rushing to make it back downtown to the precinct. You know, chances are this young girl will be placed in a foster home, says Detective Wiley, causing Detective Pierce to shake her head. It's unfortunate for this young girl. However, protocol must be followed, she responded. She exhaled deeply while shaking her head non-stop. An investigation is ongoing. There are still murders to be solved, so truthfully, who knows what's going to happen to this young girl. Gabriela is resting on the back seat, appearing to be fast asleep, which explains why Detective Pierce is speaking so freely. What are you saying? Detective Wiley asked concernedly. You can't seriously believe this little girl killed all those people, do you? Detective Pierce took a glimpse at the rearview mirror to ensure that Gabriela was sleeping. Once she realized that she was still sleeping, she nodded her head. In a soft tone of voice, she replied, Of course she killed those people. I know she killed her parents and her neighbors, as well as that young teenage couple. I can see the devil in her eyes. She's Satan in the flesh, and she doesn't have me fooled, not even the slightest. Roar! Yelled Gabriela as she banged on the miniature fence separating her from both detectives. Her sadistic side released at that very moment, causing Detective Pierce to swerve, nearly losing complete control of the vehicle. What the hell, shouted Detective Wiley. I told you, that little girl is evil, shouted Detective Pierce as she slammed even harder on the gas pedal. Radio into the lieutenant to let him know we're a few minutes away from the station. Let him know we have the killer in our custody and to be prepared to shoot to kill her if necessary upon our arrival. Detective Wiley was stunned momentarily as he attempted to register precisely where his partner was staying to him. Do it now, she ordered as Gabriela continued banging violently on the fence, causing blood to splatter from her fingertips all over it. Let me go, Gabriela shouted before belching out a thunderous growl. Detective Wiley is in a state of panic. He's completely stunned and caught off guard by what he's witnessing, which took him nearly a minute of watching pure evil being released from Gabriela non-stop for him to register exactly what was going on. It took what felt like an eternity, even as he heard his partner yelling at him before he grabbed a hold of his walkie-talkie to radio into the police station. He's nervous. He's panicking inside and out. Lieutenant Raimondo, you copy? He blurted into the walkie-talkie. I copy, replied the lieutenant instantly. Before Detective Wiley could get another word to jump from out of his mouth, Gabriela yelled, "Don't touch me. Stop touching me, Detective Wiley." She went on and on as she cried out for help. "Wait, what?" says Detective Wiley in a state of shock. He's witnessing the evil side of this young girl firsthand in the worst way. "What are you doing, Detective Wiley? What are you doing to that young girl?" Lieutenant Ramondo demanded. "I'm not doing anything to her. She's lying," Detective Wiley replied. "Give me that damn walkie-talkie," Detective Pierce ordered, which caused Gabriela to temporarily panic. Detective Pierce is the only person who can stop her, and she knows it. She had to think, and think quickly. That caused her to reach for the gun she had tucked away in her nightgown pocket. "Please put the gun down. Don't shoot me, Detective Pierce," Gabriela cried out. Her words caught Detective Pierce's full attention, even as her lieutenant yelled over and over into the walkie-talkie to figure out just what's currently taking place in that police vehicle. "Talk to me," he yelled. "What's going on?" No words left either the detectives' mouths as they observed Gabriela with a look of horror on their faces as she aimed a gun at Detective Pierce. "See you in hell," Gabriela yelled out loud before she fired a shot striking Detective Pierce in the shoulder, causing her to lose immediate control of the vehicle. The vehicle flew from off of the road instantly, sending it flipping non-stop like a gymnast doing cartwheels. Detective Wiley's body ejected from out of the vehicle, ending his life in a hurry as Gabriela took cover underneath the passenger seat, squeezing as much of her body under it as possible just to keep herself protected as much as possible. The vehicle flipped over violently, rummaging the vehicle more and more with every flip. What felt like forever with the vehicle flipping over and over finally ended with only the sound of crickets sounded off in the distance. Blurred vision and confusion took over Gabriela briefly as she began looking around for Detective Pierce, whose body rested on the dashboard of the vehicle as blood spilled from all over her. Gabriela sat back on the back seat of the vehicle, breathing heavily. She's relieved. She's a free young lady. She may have to spend the remainder of her life on the run, but it beats her ending up in prison. Her entire left side is throbbing with pain, which was inflicted by this brutal car crash. However, she's still alive, and to her, that's all that counts. Inch by inch, she slid herself over to the back passenger door, which she grabbed a hold of the door handle to open it. But the door wouldn't budge. She slammed her shoulder into the door repeatedly, time and time again, but to no avail. "Ah!" she shouted in fury. She began kicking the door, however it still wouldn't budge, even a little. She began looking around the back seat for something she could use to break her way from out of the vehicle, where she spotted the pistol resting on the floor. She leaned over to grab it to shoot her way out of the vehicle, but as she did just that, she could hear the words, "Move another inch, and to hell you'll go," Detective Pierce yelled out as she aimed her gun directly at Gabriela, causing Gabriela to freeze.